So, I'd like to welcome everyone to our January 2026 meeting of the Florida End of Life Doula Alliance. And today we are going to Lara is going to facilitate. So I'm just going to
Yeah.
turn it right to Lara.
Yes, hi everyone and welcome. I'm really glad to have you all here tonight. My name is Lara Acemyan. I am an end-of-life doula here in South Florida, as well as a board member of the Florida End-of-Life Doula Alliance, also known as FEOLDA. And tonight's conversation is called Beyond Burial and Fire. Many people don't realize that there are alternatives to traditional burial and flame cremation options that can be more gentle to the body as well as more meaningful to the environment. So we're joined this evening by Michelle Montgomery of Gentle Water Cremation here in West Palm Beach, along with Shelby and Margie from Eternal Reefs in Sarasota. So we thank you for being here, and they'll be sharing about the water cremation and how cremains can be used to help restore the Florida reefs, as well as what it can mean for families. So, if you would like to start, Michelle?
Sure, happy
Yeah,
to. Thank
you.
you. I am very excited to be here tonight. Thank you so much for hosting us. I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit more about water cremation. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see. I am not sure I have the option to share on this end. Hang on. There we go. Never mind. I found it. Okay. You should be able to see my screen in just a minute.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Just allow this, and I'm going to keep the chat open so that I can see what everybody's saying. Okay. So let's jump right in because I have a lot to cover and I want to be respectful of the time allotment that I have tonight. So, for most of Western history, traditional burial was the majority choice for body disposition, as most of us on here probably know. The first crematory in the US opened in 1876, but even by 1960, cremation accounted for only about 4% of dispositions as far as options for what to do. Everybody was still really choosing burial. Today, that number is closer to 63.4%, and it's actually expected to reach 82.3% by 2045. Basically means that, you know, burial is losing ground. No pun intended. Actually, pun intended, but okay. With that kind of popularity, it's no surprise that when we talk about cremation, we tend to associate the process with fire. But there is an alternative, which is why I'm here today, and that is water cremation. Now, you might have heard it under a different name. The scientific name is alkaline hydrolysis. And more often than not, you probably hear it referred to as aquamation. And in fact, aquamation is a term that was trademarked by one of the two major companies that manufactured the water cremation machine. So technically, we're not supposed to say aquamation when referring to the other machines, but in practice, all of the terms that you see on this page are usually interchangeable. So to me, and for many, water cremation makes the most sense because you more or less understand what it is just from the name, but no one's going to stop you from using any of the other terms. And the terms that we've heard is resumation, which is another manufacturer, biocremation, flameless cremation, green cremation, chemical cremation, aqua cremation, and liquid cremation. So before we dig in, I have a question for everyone who's here. Did you know about water cremation? Did you know that it was available in the state of Florida before this talk was announced? I'd love to see a yes or a no in the chat if you have a moment. I see yeses, lots of yeses. That's good. Awesome. Couple no's, couple no's. All right, well, let's dig into what water cremation actually is. So Water cremation replicates natural decomposition. When a person is buried in the earth, it takes anywhere from months to years for the body to break down and decompose. What happens to a body in water cremation is that we use a mixture. It's 95% water and it's 5% minerals, potassium specifically. We use heat and we use pressure. And all of this is kind of comes together in the vessel to replicate what happens in nature. But what we do in the vessel takes about 3 to 6 hours. And of course, nature can take months to years. How does it work? First, we use that warm water mineral mixture with the heat and pressure, and it gently circulates. Then it starts to mimic that natural decomposition in a shorter amount of time, and the organic material begins to break down. It produces a sterile, nutrient-rich liquid. That's all the liquid that ends up being in that vessel. And what's left over is the bones and any prosthetics that were in the body. We'll talk more about that in a few moments. The process itself uses 90% less energy than traditional options. We'll talk more about that too. So let's first dig into the actual process. First, we prepare the body. When someone comes to us, we remove all items that are not cleared for water cremation. So this includes, the clothing, bandages, jewelry, etc. And we wrap them in a bioplastic shroud, That bioplastic shroud is a cornstarch base, and it dissolves in the water with no trace residue. So there's nothing that's left over. Any prosthetics like pacemakers, metal joints, catheters don't have to be removed, making the preparation much less invasive compared to traditional flame cremation. Step 2 is that the body is loaded into the vessel. Water cremation takes place inside a sealed stainless steel chamber where the body rests in that warm pressurized bath of water that I was talking about with the alkaline solution. And then over the course of 3 to 6 hours, this carefully controlled environment accelerates the body's natural molecular breakdown, leaving only bones left. The final steps are that the bones are removed from the vessel, they're gently dried, and then they're processed into a smooth white powder. It's not really ash because we have not, sorry, I just noticed that Shanti says she knows somebody who was cremated at Gentle Water. That's amazing, thank you. We're not burning anything, so it isn't ash. The sterile liquid, which I mentioned before, called the effluent, is a very, very rich, nutrient-dense liquid. It includes amino acids, peptides, salts, sugars, and this liquid contains no DNA or tissue, and it is actually returned to our water system. And that process is a very highly regulated process through our county. We'll talk a little bit more later in this presentation about that. I'm sure you'll have some questions about it too. This is the machine. So as I said, we prepare the body. The machine itself is all digital. We prepare the body, we open the machine up. We will end up pulling that tray that you'll see in a minute. Here we go. We pull that out, we load the body. Body is in that bioplastic shroud. In this video, they show a wool coffin. Anything that's natural can go in. So we can use wool. It just ends up being a little more messy on the inside. It takes a little bit longer to break down. Water fills up, that heat comes into play, that pressure, that circulation, everything cools down, the water is drained. Then there's a rinse cycle. So it's a heated rinse cycle. Water fills up again, the bones are rinsed, and then we can pull the bones out. I know that was a very quick version. By this point, I often get one question the most often, and that is, are you boiling people? The answer is no. The vessel is pressurized, which is done to stop the water from ever boiling. So we are not, we're not making soup. We're not doing some weird things like that. So let me share a little bit about our why. There's two reasons really that we got into this business. and why it was started. The first, obviously, was that it is a more eco-conscious option. Let's talk about the environmental impacts of traditional burial for just a quick second. First, over 1.5 million tons of concrete is used annually for burial vaults. This is a necessary piece of traditional burial. There's no real way around it at this point. And it's a lot of concrete that's going into the ground. Over 30 million board feet of wood is used annually for casket productions. Over 800,000 gallons of formaldehyde-based embalming fluid enters the ground because we are still embalming people. Embalming was first started to be able to transport our soldiers very long distances so that they wouldn't decompose. Of course, this has been a staple in the funeral industry since then. We still do it, but it is not necessary. And it is a carcinogen. So it harms the funeral directors. It also harms, yes, Benny, our Mother Earth. And over 2 million acres of land is used for cemeteries, and it's not actually enough. So although they are covering so much ground, the land that's available to develop on, especially in populated areas, is shrinking. And cemeteries now are leasing plots, they're reusing graves, they're stack burials, so basically stacking people, or they lease the actual grave plot for, a number of years before they release that lease. So they're trying to accommodate demand. That demand is shrinking as cremation begins to gain traction. It's an interesting time for traditional burial. Likewise, there's environmental impacts for flame cremation. One cremation produces an average of about 534 pounds of CO2. So that's roughly the equivalent to the emissions from driving a typical car about 500 to 600 miles. That's an incredible amount of CO2 for a single cremation. And of course, they are doing multiple cremations in a day. Emissions include nitrogen, sulfur oxides, dioxins, particulate matter, and volatile organic compounds that can be harmful to our bodies and our lungs, of course, our air in general. Mercury, used in some silver fillings, can be released as vapor when exposed to extreme heat, making it an environmental concern during flame cremation. So most crematories will have a system to try to minimize the amount of particulates and some of these things getting released into the air. It's not completely fail-safe. And a crematory may use about 285 kilowatts per hour of natural gas per cremation, roughly equivalent to the monthly household energy used for a typical US home. So they're using a lot of energy as well. Now let's look at the environmental impacts of water cremation. 90% less energy is used per cremation compared to traditional flame cremations. It takes about 200 gallons less water used per cremation than the average American household. And there are no harmful emissions. And the liquid left behind from that process, as I mentioned, is completely sterile and safe. It contains natural elements like those salts and amino acids I talked about, and it's treated and is disposed through the regular wastewater system where it's treated even further. I did talk about how it was highly regulated. This is something that we go through regular testing to make sure that what's coming out of our system is sterile and okay for our water system. So we have to be extremely on top of that. And up until this point, there has been no issue. We don't foresee any issues coming. The process is because it uses natural minerals, and of course, the body is a natural organic, full of organic matter. It stays pretty sterile, sorry, I just got completely distracted. My dog is being ridiculous. Sorry, guys. Anyway, it is a sterile process. It's highly regulated. That is the point. Coming back to our 2 reasons for why we do this, we are also very focused on a drive to reimagine death care. We don't just offer an alternative method of disposition. We believe that transparency and honesty have an important role to play in death care. So our society has done a lot to sterilize death. I think most of us on this call have been aware of some of the death phobia practices that we see on a regular basis, especially as death doulas. I think death in general is, up until this point, has been kept hidden away like a dirty little secret in some cases. Hospitals tend to try to get families out as quickly as possible. We are of the mindset that we want to invite people to understand the process. Our care facility is wide open to anyone who wants to take a tour at any point in time. We are extremely transparent about who, what, where, when, and how with the families that we work with. We don't hide behind euphemisms. We are honest about what to expect. We try to use clear language. Sometimes families are not open to the clear language. So of course we meet families with where they are, but we do believe that transparency and honesty builds trust, and nothing erodes trust more than trying to soften something and expectations are not met. So when it comes time for the FAQ, I would actually be curious to hear whether certain doulas have run into similar things as far as transparency and honesty, especially when working with funeral homes and your experience there. So I will be asking you that question. We also believe that there's value in involving the family in the process, that it can bring closure. There's an anecdote in the book called The Good Funeral, where the writers talk about how funeral homes have sort of glommed onto this idea that personalization is the thing to do. But true personalization means involving the family. And a great example of that that's given in the book is how the funeral director had asked about the family and the grandparents in particular, and the grandparents were extremely handy. The grandfather was a carpenter and the grandmother did a lot of knitting. And so the funeral director invited them to create a casket for their grandson. They built this beautiful casket, they painted it, and then the family had provided pieces of materials to be woven into it, knitted into it. I feel like that's a powerful example of personalization and what it means to actually work with families, to meet them with where they are and allow them the opportunity to be as involved in the process as possible. So we are trying to not just be very transparent, but invite the families into the process of their final goodbyes and the process of grief. We believe that death care belongs to our community. So sustainable death care belongs to us all, and we're working to bring community back into funeral work. We have big ideas for the entire state of Florida. We're looking forward to having regular workshops and events and working closely with doulas. So I am exceptionally excited to make connections here tonight with all of you. And we believe that how we talk about death and dying matters. I think there's a lot of push in the funeral industry in general that we don't necessarily agree with, mostly because we felt that it's been very pigeonholed or too pigeonholed to be universal. So for example, the idea of pre-planning your funeral can remove burden from family. This is true. It absolutely can remove burden, and the end being very important. Oftentimes, the people that you leave behind want to take that burden on. That planning your funeral the way they would like to have it planned is a way for them to express their grief and their love, their honor or their anger. And so while people do have agency to plan their funerals, absolutely, and we work with them very closely to do that, if that's what they want, we also try to take the approach where it is also for those being left behind, and there is a balance there. And that's another thing that I would love to hear more about from everybody attending tonight, if you have run into that working with your clients. So coming back to what it is that we do. I saw a question that came up. Are remains returned to family? Yes. So what happens is the remains, which you can see in the picture here. I don't know if you can, whoops, I don't know if you can see my mouse. Come on. Okay. The remains are that white powder, and we bring it, the family can get those ashes back, the remains back. They can have it placed in an urn, just like regular ashes from traditional cremation. We do sea scatterings. They are a great option for eternal reefs. The family can absolutely get the ashes back. I also know of certain situations where families, maybe of a Jewish background, want the bones back. That is something that we have worked with them on. We can put the bones in a casket and they can receive the bones. Really, it comes down to what the family wants, and we work with them to make it happen. You can see in these photos, I have a photo of a sea scattering. The powder is extremely powdery, so it does not sink like a standard ash scattering. It will sort of float there for a little while, but it is a very beautiful look, as you can see from the photo. I also have a photo here of a recent case that we did. I do have her permission to use photos from it. We put up pictures. She was in the UK, and she was having a hard time being in the UK when her father's cremation was going to be run, and she wasn't even stateside. So we worked with her to develop a playlist. We printed out pictures and posted them up. We kept her posted on every moment of the water cremation. We lit candles and worked closely with her to make the best of a situation that was really difficult for her. It was especially difficult because her father had shot himself. And so when she had asked if we could wait to be able to cremate his body until she was stateside, I had to have a very straightforward conversation with her about the state of his body and what waiting might mean for his body. And this is another example of transparency with family. It goes a long way to sit down and be honest with them. We're not about to try to bend the rules like certain funeral homes might do in order to make more money or to try to basically extort a situation. As a death doula, I've run into many situations like that. And when I joined Gentle Water, it was very clear to me that that is not how they run their business. And I really appreciated that. So water cremation, getting into the nitty gritty of where, when, and how. Water cremation is legal in approximately 28 states, but that doesn't mean that every state is actively practicing. So the states in the dark blue here are actively practicing. This link is available through CANA. It's not completely legalized in some places. Our team is comprised of 4 people. You can see them here. One of them being Dean Fisher. Dean Fisher was involved in getting this process legalized in Minnesota and really kicking off the process of bringing it across the US. So we're really proud to have him on the team. Steve Pomerantz started pulling the idea of this together because he had been working with a grief camp with kids, and he started to see that there was a possibility of doing grief better. And this got him thinking. And through a little bit of a kismet situation, he met Tina, who had already been trying to find ways of using alkaline hydrolysis in the medical field. And they started to connect and decided that this was a good opportunity to really bring something different to the state of Florida. They work closely with the dean to do it, and I'm the newest recruit here. My background is as a death doula, so I'm bringing a different point of view to everything that we're doing, but it seems to be melding pretty well. And we started all of this in January of 2024, so we're coming up to our second year. We serve all parts of Florida. Margie, I saw your question come in. We're statewide, so we support absolutely everybody. And that, because I'm coming up to time, is our very quick, brief crash course in water cremation. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was really wonderful. Beautiful presentation. And I have to say that I did tour your facility, and all that she said is true. There's zero, it's, whatever you need to know, they let you see everything. So it's wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much.
We can do some question and answer now.
Sure.
Let's see. If you have a question, yeah, Bernard, just speak up.
Okay. Just one question. The jar, Michelle, that you showed with the white powder. And right after that, you went into some people want the bones back. Did that jar of white powder contain the bones from somebody who did?
Yeah, so the white jar that I showed you
Yep.
was actual remains from our first case who gave us permission. She was very excited about what was happening. And she gave us permission to use her remains as well as the hip joints and some of the prosthetics that came out of her as educational purposes. One thing that I didn't mention is that with this process, you actually get about 20% more remains than you would from a traditional flame cremation. So there is a lot of remains that come, and typically we have to coach our families on the size of urn to get, because it can be so much.
Well,
yeah.
Can I ask? I mean, let's say the people had wanted the bones.
Yep.
So that means that jar that you showed would have less volume because it would be without bones. Did you grind up bones or whatever,
Yes.
to get into that powder? How did it get there?
Yes. So the bones that come out of the machine are extremely porous because they've been sitting in water. So they can be broken down very easily. We take those bones and we put them through a cremulator, which is the same thing that they use for flame cremation. And that grinds everything down into that ashy form, the powder form. So it is the bones themselves, unless they want the full bones, in which case, that's what we do. We put them in a box and we let them know that the bones are very porous when they get them. But otherwise, we will process it just like traditional cremation, and you will get the remains back. Yeah.
So was that bag on the boat, the picture of the bag on the boat,
Yes.
was that more like the size? So the jar just had a
portion. Yeah. This jar is just a sample. The bags, and it'll vary depending on how large the person was. A smaller person will have less. But essentially, yes, it is that bag. Typically you get like a full bag. I'm seeing questions about cost and how it compares to cremation. Great question. Our cost averages about $3,000. Many of you might be aware of the Funeral Consumers Alliance. They practice conducting surveys across different counties wherever they operate. They have different chapters across the United States. They practice creating surveys and can provide consumers with a good idea of what the cost is across the board, because of course everybody has a different way of pricing. General cremation can range from $800 or even $600 up to $7,000, $8,000, $15,000. It really depends. We've tried to price ourselves at an accessible rate Of course, we serve all of Florida, so we wanted to make sure that that was a rate that was pretty much on par with what you would find throughout the state of Florida, but we did want to keep it a little bit on the lower side. I would say we're a little bit lower than most of the other cremation places.
I have another question. Somewhere I read that depending on the temperature, the speed of the process can change. So if it's hotter, it would be faster. What temperature do you keep the water at?
Our water ranges from anywhere from when it first enters the vessel, I think it's 180 up to 235. I see Steve on here. Steve, if you're on here and you know the answer, jump in.
It gets up to about 302.
302.
Fahrenheit.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. 302. The timing of a body, thank you, Steve. The timing of a body also really depends on how large the body is. So larger bodies will take a little bit longer. They'll take closer to 6 hours. Smaller bodies will take, 3 to 4.
And Diana is asking, how does body get transported to your facility? I'm in Central Florida.
Yeah, so our facility, we handle transports from across the state, of course. We work with trusted transport providers, and the moment we get a call that comes in, we can dispatch one of our teams, and they will go and get the body and bring them into our care. From the moment they arrive into our care, we're connecting regularly with the family. As I said, we work very closely with the family through the process. And of course, if families want to do viewings, if they want to do a witnessing, that's all possible.
So is there like a per mile fee added on for transportation?
Yes.
And how does that work?
Yeah. So essentially, we have broken down our transport costs based on areas to make it a little bit easier. So up to 100 miles from our care facility, it's already included in our package. And then depending on where you are, so, Gainesville, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, Tampa, Clearwater, depending on where you are, we have different sort of mileage packages that go with that. And then anywhere beyond, I think 300 miles, it's $5 per mile. So that's also something that we talk to the family about when the call comes in. As you can tell, it's a lot easier when we have worked with a family as early as possible through the hospice situation. The doulas on here will know that the more information that you can gather ahead of time, it just makes the process a little bit easier.
Hi there. This is Margie with Eternal Reefs.
Hi, Margie.
Great, Margie.
Hi.
Thank you. I know you were having trouble connecting.
I know, I don't know what's going on. I've been messing with this like on and off all day, and I so apologize. I can't pull up my video either, but I know that it was sent to you guys. Are you able to?
I can share it for you, yes.
That'd be great.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And Shelby is not with me today. Something suddenly came up. Let's just say that.
Okay, not a problem. Let's see. I will share my screen.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes. Yes. Let's see.
Okay, here we go. There it is. Hi there, everyone. And thank you so much for your patience while I get together on this. I very much appreciate the opportunity to spend a few minutes giving you a high-level overview of who Eternal Reefs is and what we're all about. So we basically, my name is Margie Ploense. I'm the director of planned giving, and that's an interesting title only because we are a nonprofit. So basically what I do is I am the pre-arrangements individual for the company. Everything that you would or a client would pay to Eternal Reefs is considered a tax-deductible item. Here's our mission statement. Slide next, if you can, please. It's to preserve, protect, and enhance the marine environment for the benefit of future generations through the use of memorialization. We've been creating our living environmental memorials since 1998 and became a nonprofit organization in 2017. So what we do is we use reef balls. And I know that's not necessarily the most convenient name for a lot of people, but what is a reef ball? Very good question. It's a designed artificial reef that mimics a natural reef. Reef balls are made in varying sizes that match the actual reef type that's being mimicked, or, in our case, for specific purposes. Thank you so much. Some of the key features, which is really what makes our reefs the gold standard around the world. There are between 1 and 2 million of our reefs in 70 countries around the world. Now, many of those reefs, in fact, most of those reefs, do not contain cremated remains. They are strictly there for environmental purposes. So there's an aggregate to the surfaces of the reef, which helps sea life and corals attach themselves. We have a flat bottom with lots of holes and a hollow interior, so round, vented, and hollow, like it says, and a minimum of 550 pounds for stability purposes. This is something that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers requires for these types of reefs. What are some of the uses of artificial reefs? There are many other uses beyond memorialization. So I'm just going to scroll our way through this quickly. They are, and the next slide, please, for shoreline protection and erosion control. How many people have ever lived or been by an area where they're losing their shoreline? Well, we have Eternal Reefs or reef balls lining shorelines to protect it from its erosion. We do coral plant transplant and rescue programs with our reefs. Oops. I'm not the only one having issues. There's mangrove restoration that takes place as a result of our reefs. So there are so many environmental purposes beyond the memorialization aspect that Eternal Reefs is involved in. And these are handled by several of our strategic business partners who are known as Reef Innovations. They're the company that actually builds the reefs and has deployed that 1 and 2 million in 70 countries around the world. And another entity that's also a nonprofit like us called the Reef Ball Foundation that involve themselves in the education of what reefs are all about. But from a memorialization perspective, which is what you guys are really all here for, we hold approximately 20 to 30 planned deployments in about 15 locations over the course of a 4-day period with 3 days being active. Each of our locations are held in vacation destination locations. So, a lot of people find it to be a fabulous way to reconnect with family over the loss of a loved one. And by the way, the guy in the white shirt in that picture is our CEO. That's okay. That's George. Anyway, so how do our programs work, and how do we do what we do? We have 3 different reef sizes. The largest of the reefs will hold up to 4 sets of cremated remains of people, as well as a certain number of pets. So this is our largest reef. It's called the Mariner. It's 4 by 6 feet and weighs between 3,800 and 4,000 pounds. We only deploy this reef in a couple of our locations due to its sheer size and weight. More commonly used are the Nautilus and the Aquarius. The Nautilus, you can read 4 by 3. It's designed for the cremated remains of 2 people and their pets. They're, of course, excellent habitat for sea life, as you'll see in a couple of slides from now. The Aquarius, that's our most compact reef. It meets the minimum standards for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers at 550 to 700 pounds. It's designed for 1 person and up to 5 pounds of pet cremains. Each of the different reefs is going to attract different types of sea life, obviously. Every reef, for memorialization purposes, comes with a bronze plaque that is designed and personalized by the family, or in pre-planning arenas by the actual individual or individuals who will inhabit that reef if they're pre-planning and it's for a future need. We encourage our families to come on out and participate because, like I said, there's 3 active out of 4 days that we invite the families to come to these vacation destinations, like where we're headquartered, which is Sarasota, Florida. And the first day is called the casting. The casting is when we take the cremated remains and they're, by the families in most cases, mixed with our specialty concrete and poured into a mold that is then settled into the bottom of the reef after it starts to cure about a day later. Families get involved in doing that mixing and decorating the reef at the same time. If you could go back one more, I'm sorry. Thank you so much. And that casting, you see that the photo all the way on the left-hand side of your screen. A fresh coat of concrete is placed around the top ring of the reef itself, and families will bring or use our supplies to personalize that portion of the reef with memories from the life or lives of their loved ones. Handprints are often used as well. At the viewing, what happens, that takes place 2 days later. So let's get this down. Families are invited for the casting. That's typically on a Friday. The Friday is complete, and then the families will go ahead and take Saturday off to go have fun by themselves while we let the cremains cure in what is the pearl, which you see here on Military Honors. If you could back up one slide, I would really appreciate it. I'm sorry. So the viewing, that takes place on Sunday. So Friday is the casting. Saturday is a day off for families. The viewing, the families are invited back because now you can see the reef is in its final format. There's no cuffs, no buoys, no anything around the reef. It's done. It's prepared. And the cremated remains are inside the reef at that point, which is the hard work that Eternal Reefs staff does on the Saturday. Okay. So families gather. Remember, I mean, sometimes there can be, oh my goodness, we can have 40 people for one person's reef. Other times it's unattended. There's no one in attendance for the reef. It varies quite wildly. But the day of the viewing, which is Sunday, next slide, please, we also provide military honors for veterans. Now, all the way on the left-hand side, you can see those hands touching that piece of stone. That's actually where the cremated remains reside. They were mixed into the concrete and then cured and then turned over and placed into the very bottom of the reef. But military honors would take place on Sunday at noon. And it's, of course, as many of you have experienced or know, a very moving experience, especially when we have multiple. We've actually had it where we've had a military honors for every branch of the military in one Sunday. Next. Okay, so then very early Monday morning, the next day, we have the placement. The placement is where families are given the opportunity to go out on our family chartered boat or their own boat, and our reefs are loaded up on a fishing boat or a barge. The two get very close together out at the reef site, wherever that might be in our multiple locations, I should say, and they are able to witness the reef go into the water up close and personal. And if they can't be there in person, the entire weekend is also live streamed. So for someone who can't travel or doesn't wish to travel or wants to be there in, spirit but not in person, they can watch all of the proceedings in our live streaming. We've had some really great luck with that. While we're on the family chartered boat, we actually give each family a miniature reef, which you can see again at the bottom left. And we bring buckets of fresh flowers. They're given the opportunity to decorate that reef. And then each family gets a moment at the bow of the boat to say their final goodbyes to their loved one or ones. And we're about wrapping up here. We are, as I've mentioned several times, only allowed to deploy our reefs where we have been given a permit to do so. The permits are issued again by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We are headquartered in Sarasota. We have had our sites in Fort Lauderdale / Miami. It's right on the border. Pensacola, Ocean City, Maryland, Ocean City, New Jersey, Topsail Island, North Carolina, and North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, but we've been in a variety of former locations and are tackling Key West in September of 2026. That initial dedication will not include cremated remains in the reefs. That's a whole nother story. And to wrap it up, so I talk a lot about cremation. So Michelle, I really appreciated your presentation. I have often wondered how someone from, like, say, up here gets to you. I think I heard a little bit about, there's different rates for picking up a body depending upon where in Florida they are. But we are not a cremation resource. Let's put it that way. We are reef builders. We are not licensed for cremation. So we do not do that portion. And my rates of cremation match yours. There's the standard flame cremation, and we are very familiar with aquamation, or the other words you used for it, the green or resumation or biocremation or flameless cremation or whatever. But here's the deal. It's available in Florida, but I don't know if it's affordable. And that's one question I have for you. I had a customer recently, just over New Year's, who wanted his mother to be cremated via aquamation, but they weren't, we were not aware. It was a very short turnaround, and we really weren't aware of how we were going to, get her body to you down in Florida. And I had been told that there was another entity in St. Petersburg. But anyway, there's also the natural organic reduction that, decomposes the body in its totality. But here's the only thing we have with aquamation. Because of the bones that are left over, we have to use what we call a special pearl, because cremated remains normally are smooth when they're flame cremated. We have to actually use the special pearl, which gives you a basis of concrete. Then you put all the cremains on top, and then you close it off with more concrete rather than stirring and mixing. Okay, so that should wrap that up. And then the next piece, this is my beautiful picture. This is a reef in the Gulf of, wherever you want to call it, the Gulf of, that's been placed at the time this photo was taken for 2 years. There's that starfish on the bronze plaque, which is actually kind of humorous, because in the videos that came with this particular photo, the starfish was crawling across the bronze plaque. And this was taken by a diving photographer with all the right lenses and that sort of thing. So you can see the holes close up. You can't hardly tell it was an artificial reef after 2 years in the water. Okay, next. And here's the deal. We make a difference with future needs, obviously current needs as well. We do a future plan. That's what I head up. We call it the Living Legacy Program, where you can either pay in full or pay over time. Current need, of course, is a pay in full, because it normally happens immediately following cremation. I really appreciate your attention span, even though I have no way of knowing because I can't hear anything. But thank you so much. Hello. Hi. You hear me okay?
Yes, that was great, Margie. Sorry, I just wanted to jump in because nobody else jumped in. Sorry.
Thank you so much,
Did
Margie.
you have questions?
I did see a question come in.
Okay.
Let's see. How often do these locations permits change?
So what do we mean by that? Permit change. Oh,
That
the
was-
permits?
That was my question. I was just
they're
wondering.
hard to come by.
Yeah.
They're not easy to come by. And we've had, since 1998, success with many of our locations. The biggest difficulty we've had is obtaining permits off the West Coast of the United States, both off the coast of California and Hawaii. So they don't change that often because it is not easy to have the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers grant you a permit. But you saw the list of where we'd been previously. So there's a number of times that we have done that. We like to think that there are people who are interested in the concept, not where their reef would go, because it does the same provides the same benefit, whether you're in Sarasota or Ocean City, Maryland. Did I get it? Oh, you got 10 more questions here. Okay. Cost. We run in price from the small reef at $42.50 to the largest reef at $92.50 plus cremation. Now, remembering the largest reef holds 4 people and the mid-size reef is in the 6,200 range, and that holds 2 people. So they're, I think, appropriately priced, especially in comparison to many alternatives, the standard burial type, you know.
Michelle, did you have a
What
question?
are other questions? It's really hard to hear you guys.
Yeah, Margie, I had a question, and I'll also speak to
Sure.
something you said after. But my question to you first is, do you work? You mentioned working with, coral restoration. Do you work with Coral Restoration Foundation and Reef Renewal, or is that do you have a list of organizations you've partnered with?
Well, that would be more aligned with our business, our strategic business partners,
Sure,
either
yeah.
Reef Innovations or the Reef Ball Foundation. I mean, our business is with what we do. It's filling up every one of our location sites and dates with reefs and going out there and taking care of it. So there are probably many of those organizations that you mentioned that would have aligned themselves more with Reef Innovations, who actually builds the reefs and has the between 1 and 2 million installed in 70 countries around the world, or their other counterpart, the Reef Ball Foundation. So we don't necessarily partner because we're too busy. Where there isn't time.
Understood.
And it's
Thanks.
not our core competency either.
Yeah, no, I get it. Thank you. And just to clarify something that you had said, you mentioned another company doing water cremation. That was most likely Anderson McQueen. It was a funeral home that provided water cremation in St. Petersburg. But they were acquired by Foundation Partners, and they haven't been doing it for about 12 years. Yeah. And just to speak to something else you mentioned, our remains are powder. They can be mixed in.
No, we've received them.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure if that was.
Well, we have, and that's why we've had to use the special pearl, because we really get bones. But maybe not with you.
Okay, probably not, because with ours.
Remember, we're working with people from all over the country or world.
Yeah. No, yeah, okay. I was wondering about that. Thank you. I appreciate the
yes, we
information.
get people that are international as well as in every crevice of the United States. We get between 350 and 600 requests for our information every month.
Shanti, you have a question?
Yes, I was wondering, because Michelle is saying that you end up with more cremains with water cremation. So when you talk about how many bodies go into the different reef balls, I wonder if there would be, if there's a difference, like what percentage more material is there, or is it still this? You still have the 2 or the 4?
We still have the 1, the 2, and the 4. We really don't have to be that specific with it, Of course, it all depends on what the person weighs in the first place, or even what the pets weigh. I've actually been asked before if I can handle a llama, an alpaca, or a horse along with their human counterparts, which is kind of funny. when you think about it, because they weigh 3 times or 4 times as much as us, and there's no way. When we talk about pets, we mean cats, dogs, birds, things like that.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you
Mhm.
so much. Well,
So
we're at
I'm sorry, I went over. Apologize. Took me too long to get set up.
No, you're totally fine. Did you have anything else you wanted to say before we close?
No, I just wanted to thank you guys for letting us be involved here.
Well,
it was wonderful.
Yeah, we want to thank you and Michelle for sharing so wonderfully, and thank all of you for being so open and curious tonight. These conversations really do matter, and they help families realize that we do have choices, and to see what feels more right for each individual. So yeah, that's important. Thank you.
Very well. Very well said. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.